Well, thank you all. I think that was helpful for the first session. And in terms of moving forward, one of the questions we always get asked is about, okay, a lot of these efforts started with grants or started in some crazy person off in some department was doing this, and so what do you do to scale these things? What do you do to sustain these things? What are the business models? How do you keep it going? And then once some of these people go away, how do you keep it going even after that? And so this panel said they have all the answers to those questions. So, have that. With that, I'm very pleased to introduce Jane Nichols, who's long been a friend of WCET and WCET and has helped us out over the years. Jane, I'll turn it over to you. Let's see.
Good morning. Everybody grab some coffee, check your phone, you're ready to go again, right? It's a pleasure to be here. I have been involved in WCET and WCET for a long time, and it is a pleasure to be here at this meeting and hearing of the new programs that are being developed and the new efforts that are being made to serve our students and educate them well. They say if you're not changing, then you're dying. So we certainly in higher ed are changing. We have to be changing. We have to be moving forward. And this is a great example of this. It's been a pleasure for me as one who came to learn more. I am very aware of the data that Kale and others have produced that show in this era of trying to get our students to graduate that those students who come in with prior learning, with recognized prior work, however it comes, are much more likely to finish and to graduate. So we are indeed extremely interested in this in Nevada. It is my pleasure to be able to introduce this great panel we have. We're down to the point in our meeting where we really want to go home with a clear understanding of what we can do when we go back to our campuses or our system. And the key question that I have heard coming up throughout the day and a half has been, is this a financially viable model? Will it work on my campus for me to initiate this program? So I'm going to ask the panelists in particular to address the three questions that are in your program. I'm going to reword them just a bit, and they all have the information they need to give you about the work they're doing. But to be sure in those comments that they cover these points, does your program actually lower the cost to the student for obtaining a degree or a certificate? And describe core aspects of your business model and how you can sustain the program when any startup costs go away. And third, are the practices that you have, in your opinion, transferable to other colleges, universities, programs that will help lower the cost to students and the success of our students in higher ed? So with that, I'd like to introduce our first panelists whom you have heard before, and it's such a pleasure to introduce Allison Lee Brown, who is the Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs at Northern Arizona University. Thank you.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be able to talk with you all again. I will get straight to the issues because there's so many things to address in a short time. And as such, I won't review our model because I think you've heard a lot about the model already, and there's shared features of the models. The affordability issue. Our personalized learning degrees are available to students for $2,500 for a 6-month subscription. During that time, they can do as much work as they are able to do, including their prior learning. So far, so good. We're able to sustain that, and the way that we're able to sustain that affordable price for our students is by unbundling the faculty role. For most of us, the bulk of our budget is in personnel, and by unbundling the faculty in the way that we have, we're able to service more students with fewer numbers. We've also unbundled the student services role, and we've integrated those. And I'll talk more about that in a minute and show you how. And I'll show you by showing you our org charts. And I think that org charts reveal so much about an institution, and so I'll show you how we've done that. What I can't show you is the dotted lines, but I'll explain those as we get to those. So the first lesson in unbundling is that we noticed as we became more intimate with student services and more intimate with how quickly our students wanted to get started, we realized that we would have to do our own transcripting. So within our own division. And it took a little while to get permission to do that. And I know we have a registrar present, and we were very careful to have good relations with that office. But we do our own transcripting at the front end, and we're able to credit the student with the unofficial read of the transcript as if it were official. And we will not change that for the student. So the student gets that, but then we send and that happens on the student service side. Then we send an audit at the end of a month to the relevant faculty, and if the faculty disagree with the decision, which we don't think that they will because for a year we've been working with them and shadowing each other doing the intake evaluation, if there's a disagreement, we'll change the rule in the system but not disadvantage the student. Okay, so that's one lesson learned, and I'm going to be really, really concrete and mechanical today, and so, but that's a concrete thing, is take control of the transcripting and the unofficial as official, but with checks that don't minimize faculty power. The second lesson is that we had to learn how to talk cross-culturally between faculty and student services. And so when I show you the reporting structure, I'll show a little bit about that. But an even more important thing than the reporting structure is that we have joint meetings that we pattern after sort of a Scrum model or an Agile model. And so we have meetings really, really often, very short meetings with the key people from the student services side and the faculty side. And, we're all dispersed, and so those meetings are often, we use Link, and we just do a real quick thing. What did you do? What do you need? What's standing in your way? Boom, around the table, and it's very, very helpful. And so that one I guess, piece of advice is something that we brought over from IT that works really, really well for us. And we also are obsessive compulsive about documenting everything we do, another thing that we sort of brought over from IT. And so we document our job descriptions, our daily work, as if we were documenting code. And so and someone mentioned yesterday, are our people going to be hired away? Yes, they will. Our people get offers all the time. They have a skill that is so highly desirable. And right now we're all in love with each other. We're in a honeymoon phase. And so we've been able to keep everybody but one person. And we sent her to the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale. And we're really happy. And we stole her from Thunderbird School of Management before they had their troubles. But, she was fantastic. She did a lot for us. And we lovingly sent her on her way to that great opportunity, and we were happy to help her that way. But people will try and take your faculty and your student services people, and so and we're happy for our people to find advancement. The transformation is the whole point. But what we do is we document every new thing we do, and we document it in terms of the description of what we do, and we document it in terms of how it is done very precisely. We have those descriptions in a SharePoint, but people don't like SharePoint that much. And so what we also have is just a living document that has URLs embedded to videos with screenshots. When I have to change this particular thing for a student on the Pearson side, here is what I do. Here's what it looks like in the screen. If it won't work, here's the person to contact. And so it's very precise. And again, I know I'm giving sort of what seem like mundane and I hope not boring details, but these things have really saved us. And then if someone leaves us, we're able to quickly train the next person. And for every role that we have that document ready to give to the person, but to the new person, so that they're right up. But we also have orientation tutorials for every single role, and those are video, and they're closed. They're just in-house, and those are created by the person that will be replaced. Yeah, so that's about unbundling the faculty and student services. The second thing that I want to talk about are more general. So those were sort of the in-the-weeds specific things. We have every role very, very defined, not just in reality, but in every system. And so our roles are new roles, they're evolving, they're defined, but they're defined within the systems, and they match. And so there's the faculty lead, there's the mentor faculty. Those have different access within our different systems that are the same. So there's a symmetry between the human being and that person as an avatar within the systems. And if there's questions about that, I can answer that later. But also we have business rules around those roles that we've learned how to talk about in a way that makes us beloved by our IT department. And that's so important. And so the first set of business rules that I gave to IT, I'm so glad that they were so generous and kind to me. And now I know how to give business requirements in a better way, and it's something that we are really, we teach each other how to talk in a generous way to the IT department who do so much for us. We also share the burden and joy with our partner, and so we've learned how to be a good partner with Pearson, and they've learned how to be a good partner with us. And here's an example of how we not only saved money, but did something really beautiful for students and all of our students. And I'm really proud of this example, and it has to do with universal design. The person that we lost, the only person that has turned over since we started, was hired to be the curriculum design manager, and she was very committed personally to disability issues. And she said, "Oh, Allison, this is really beautiful, but you're not paying sufficient attention to universal design." And I said, "We're compliant." I'm ashamed, but I said, "We're compliant." And she said, "Let's not be compliant. Let's universally design." And I said, "Okay, show me how to do it. Let's learn how to do this." And so we worked very closely with our partner at Pearson and with our IT department, because we have a lot of systems going. We are completely universally designed, which is not only good for ADA, but is also beautiful for all of our students, because it is true, if you universally design something, then it is better for everybody, which is the beauty of that philosophy. The really awesome thing about it is that in pushing that forward, okay, we were able to make it so that Pearson now has the systems that interact with us universally designed. And so we have a sort of small part of the world. Pearson has a huge part of the globe, and now that's changed that practice. So we're proud of that. Okay, let me show the org charts real fast. And these are our org charts, and they're not really interesting, but they show what we have. So there's me, and I'm just showing the local part. Of course, I report up. But then there's the lead faculty, and the lead faculty only work on curriculum. That's all they do. And so we decided to have each layer of faculty report then back to the one that was hired first. So the faculty mentors are assigned only to students. We hire them with 2 criteria. They have to have the terminal degree as if we were hiring them in any other part of our university, and the research and so on. But they also have to have 5 years industry experience. The faculty mentors report to their lead faculty, and we grow those out, of course, more quickly than lead faculty. The subject matter faculty are attached to pieces of the curriculum, and they are hired, again, terminal degree and 5 years experience in the industry, more if we can get it. They report to the faculty mentors, and they are assigned to pieces of the curriculum. And then our graders are GAs. And every time you can make a business decision for sustainability, that is by helping all parts of your institution do it. We're offering GAs to a lot of departments. They love us for that. We love having the GAs, and it's really good for the students, of course, because they have experience with a new and exciting model. And so our graders are GAs, and we just do the standard GA tuition and so forth. And then one more. Then we have our professional staff, which is student services, and we have an associate director. She was the first person I hired, and then she is in charge of curriculum manager. Our technical lead is our analyst that reports through the IT department, and then we have all the key things. We have an admissions coordinator who is our liaison to the admissions. We have a student service coordinator who liaises with all the student services, and then prior learning coordinators, and they talk to every single student for the appropriate thing. And so our student services and our mentor faculty have a dotted line report. And we're thinking about making that dotted line less dotted and more direct. Okay, so we really want those people to talk to each other. Can these practices move to more traditional models? Absolutely. The thing that we remember is something that was emphasized, I think, by Sally yesterday, and that is that our best recruiting tool is going to be word of mouth by students. And the word of mouth that students will give will only be granted to us if we've been good both in our curriculum and in how we treat our students through our faculty and our student services. So all those things have to go together. Our president, John Hager, is going to teach MPL starting in the fall. And that's going to be really, really great for us. And the relation between that and the traditional models is that the reason that he's teaching with us is that he wants to learn everything about our system so he can take the things that we do well, and we hope there's a lot of them from his perspective, to take the things that we do well to the main campus and then beyond. And so we're happy about that. We work closely and well with the mothership, the main campus, and in doing that, we're able to find ways of saying, oh, you know what, our IT guys learned how to do this, can we do that for you? And they usually say yes. And so we can help the rest of the university also save money in these ways. And then finally, we are able, because we have those good relations, to get dispensations that we wouldn't be able to do and that I think will help the traditional model. So one more concrete example. We just, I think, what's today, Thursday? On Monday, we got permission to code our own catalog entries. Okay, and that's huge. I sort of expected applause, but you know, I mean, we've been working on it, and what we wanted was the ability to switch our catalog really, really quickly on our real time, and that's a huge thing to ask the registrar. Okay, and we were able to get that, but now what we're thinking is because technology is easier to manage in certain of the information sides of it than it used to be, so that it's not a really onerous thing to put in a catalog entry. It's only onerous if you're doing an entire university. So we're going to do ours. It's a pilot. If we do a good job, then a lot of that will get downloaded out of the registrar's purview, and then departments will have a more direct link to their catalog. And so those are the things that we're doing. And because we have that culture bridge between student services and faculty and administration, then we have dashboards that have evolved to reflect the interconnection and interpenetration that we have. And so this dashboard shows a view that you can see from the student, but it's easy to click then to the mentor role, which is different from the subject matter mentor role, from the GA role, all with their different permissions. So we've safeguarded any possibility of someone having the wrong access and going in, since we're real-time people, going in and changing the curriculum prematurely before it's been vetted. Okay, so I'll leave you with that slide. And thank you.
So what we've done is a little bit different, although there's quite a few similarities I think you'll see with what Northern... Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Van Davis. I'm Director of Innovations of Higher Education at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. And one of the things I think that makes my presence here unique is because I'm not at one of our institutions. I'm at our state agency, which means that unless there's an accreditor in the room, I'm usually the most hated guy there. And it's been very unusual for our agency to, or Department of Ed, actually. I'm really happy about Federal Department of Ed now. But it's been really unusual for our agency to step into this space, because this is not something that we've traditionally done. We've run course redesign grants and worked with institutions on that. We've helped facilitate the development of a statewide digital learning objects repository, statewide online professional development, a statewide degree completion initiative, but really working with institutions to develop a new type of methodology and modality and curriculum has been a little unique for us. So what we've done is we worked with two institutions. We worked with South Texas College, which is one of the 3 baccalaureate community colleges in Texas. It's at the very tip of the state in McAllen. And then we worked with Texas A&M University Commerce, one of our regional institutions, which is east of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So very different ends of the geographic spectrum in Texas, and that's big and a lot. It's almost 1,000 miles. And very different cultural worlds as well, and very different student populations, and they were chosen for those reasons and because of the strengths that we thought that they could bring to the table. We also, like Northern Arizona and some of the other folks here, were lucky enough to get one of the EDUCAUSE NGLC Wave 3B grants, and I now have a very real idea of just how little $1 million is when trying to do these things. What we've done, as I said, is somewhat similar. We started this initiative in part because many of you may remember that our governor a few years ago suggested that each of our universities should be able to offer at least one $10,000 degree, including books. And you'll probably also remember what the pretty much national reaction was to that. You may remember the Chronicle of Higher Ed and the Inside Higher Ed articles. If you go back to the Chronicle articles and you read the comments, there's some really choice words that I was called by people because I'm the guy at the agency that was told to figure out how to do this and figure out how to help our institutions do it. What we've done is developed a hybrid competency model. The lower division, including all the gen ed, that's 90 semester credit hours, is hybrid. The upper division is accelerated cohort driven. One institution offers it online, the other institution offers it in a blended modality to eventually offer it online. It's a Bachelor of Applied Sciences in Organizational Leadership, so we started small. We started with 1 degree. And we chose an applied baccalaureate degree very specifically because we wanted to have a mechanism already in place that we could leverage as much existing credit and experience as possible. And in Texas, the most common pathway for a degree completion, and we're really aiming at that degree completer audience. We've got 3.6 million adults in Texas with some college credit and no degree. That's a little bit larger than the national average, but not much. We got either 35 or 37 million in the U.S., depending upon whether or not you go with Bureau of Labor Statistics or Lumina's estimates. That's a sobering figure for us. And when we dug in and began to do focus group work and began to talk to folks that had stopped out, why did they stop out? A lot of reasons, but for many of them it was cost. And so we had folks that were racking up debt, and we know from our own data that the folks that stop out from a Texas public university in Texas stop out with debt. So we knew that we had folks that were racking up debt, were stopping out, didn't have the credential. So not only did they have the debt, but they didn't have the credential that was going to help them get a better job that would help them erase the debt. And from just a state investment perspective, which are also words I never thought I would utter 3 years ago. I never thought I'd be on a business model panel either, to tell you the truth. But that's bad business for us. That's a poor investment from just where we're putting our money for our students. So that was why we did this. Is it affordable for students? Yes. We use a subscription model. We run 6-7 week terms. $650 per term, including all lower division curriculum materials, all-you-can-eat buffet model. It is all virtual. It is self-paced for the student, but it is facilitated by faculty that provide on-demand assistance as needed. So first answer, yes, we think it's affordable for the students. We think it can be done in 3 years. Upper division coursework is done in only 1 calendar year. We think that for a student who comes in with nothing at all, they can finish in 3 years for probably between $12,000 and $14,000. For a student who comes in with some credit or with some experience or really wants to move and progress quickly, they can come in for much lower than that. If they come in with everything and just need that upper division coursework, they can finish in 1 year for about $4,000, which is pretty radical, we think. So that's the first thing. Is it making it more affordable for students? Yes. And that was our primary commitment and driver, because we believe that affordability is an access issue. I was trained as a civil rights historian and taught for over a decade. For me, this is a civil rights issue. Affordability is access. It's civil rights. So that was our primary priority. Our business model is in some ways very similar to what you heard Allison describe. We use an unbundled, disaggregated faculty model. Our buckets are a little different, although not much. We have academic coaches. These are all full-time, salaried professional staff. We do not use adjuncts. And we made that decision very consciously as well. We believe that we have better quality. We believe that it's like apples and oranges in terms of teaching in this program and teaching in another program. And again, it's an ethical issue too. And the economics work out too, because there's a lot of underemployed folks with PhDs that desperately want to work directly with students and are upset that they're having to cobble together a living that doesn't let them have contact with those students. So our academic coaches are master's degree professionals. They provide on-demand assistance to the students. They are their guides through the program. We started with folks that have counseling degrees or have counseling experience. Each institution has one right now. They'll work with that student until they graduate. They mentor them through the system. We then have faculty at the institutions that were existing that help develop the curriculum. They develop the competencies, they develop the learning outcomes, the enabling objectives. They've reviewed all of the curriculum resources. They've had complete control over that. A gen ed group and an upper division group. We have content instructors that work directly with the students that are enrolled in these modules. Again, at least credentialed with a master's degree, although I suspect that we will eventually be able to staff almost fully, if not fully, at the terminal level. And because they work virtually, they can be anywhere in the United States, or the world for that matters. And then we don't have the greater GA component there yet, and that was an economic decision for us. Our two schools are relatively small. They are not the wealthiest institutions in the state. We have used no state appropriations for this project. So we have cobbled it together with what was there. And that meant making some decisions about how we can gradually build up to a full staffing model. So for us right now, those content instructors are also the ones that are doing assessment. Eventually, I believe we'll move to a fully unbundled, like what NAU and what WGU has done. But for us, we need to work to that in order for this to be economical for our institutions. In terms of cost and expense for the institutions, we ran some of the most calculated and complex budget projections that I've certainly ever done, although that's probably not the best indicator since I'm just a historian and my wife does the budgeting in our household. But we did this as a part of the grant proposal, and we made sure that each one of our institutional presidents saw them. Because what they showed, because we're scaling slowly, we wanted to build sustainability, and we didn't want to blow out the infrastructure of these two schools. Because our program, unlike NAU's, is embedded in the institutions. It doesn't live in its own department. We don't have our own student services. We'll have our own staff eventually, but but not our own student services, not our own IT. It lives in existing academic infrastructure. And that was both an economic issue for us, but it was also a sustainability issue for us, of wanting to fully integrate it into the institutional life and culture for long-term growth and replication. So we're scaling up slowly. We started in January, very small group of students, about 10 or 12 between the two schools, and scaling very slowly. We'll have, we think, about 250 by the end of this calendar year. But so for us, we wanted to make sure that they saw those projections, because for the first 4 years, this program runs in the red, and boy does it run in the red. They are expensive to start. This is not cheap to build something brand new. However, when we run the numbers, and because of the scalability of it, what we saw is that by the 5th year, not only does it operate in the black, it erases all 4 years of losses and then some in spades, because it's reached that tipping point. So is it sustainable for the institutions? Yes. We believe that it is. We believe it's sustainable for the state too. Very quickly, though, that means that we've had to deal with sort of we've dealt with a lot of challenges, but there's 3 business-related ones that I want to put on the table real quickly here. The first is that in terms of administrative systems and IT infrastructure and legacy systems, we're running legacy systems at the institutions. That means that we've had to work really hard to, as what somebody said yesterday, not have the tail wag the dog. And that is an unmitigated nightmare. I will not lie. That has been the most unpleasant surprise of all of this. I think things are getting better. We, as many of the other institutions, are talking with vendors who are beginning to realize and working with us to try to figure out how to change things. But it is hard, and in the business area especially, that has the tendency, if you're not careful, to drive the curriculum. The second big challenge that I want to pull out here is that we had to figure out, from a state policy level, we're having to figure out how can we develop, if not economic incentives for institutions to do this, how can we at least not disincentivize them to do it with our state funding models? And that's some really interesting work that I'm doing with RAND on looking at the feasibility of alternative funding models, which I'm really happy to tell you about later, because that's how much of a policy wonk I am. The third thing, though, and this echoes what Allison, I think, ended with, and we benefited, by the way, with the open work that you did with Pearson, is we've learned that we have to have different types of partnerships with vendors. When we started this project, we did not think we were going to work with any vendors. We very quickly realized in order to get a brand new program off the ground in less than 2 years, we had to. But it also meant that those had to be very different types of collaborative partnerships than what I think the vendor partnership has traditionally been at these 2 schools. And it's meant really, truly working in collaboration. We have 3 primary business partners that we're working with on these things. Pearson has worked with us on the lower division curriculum. Blackboard Learning Solutions is working with us on trying to figure out some of these back-end IT integration issues, and also helping us think about assessment of the program. And then for predictive analytics, we're working with Civitas Learning. And we think that one of the ways that we make this possible and feasible in the long run and affordable for the institutions is we use humans where we use humans, where we know they do the best, but we leverage technology wherever we can. And we think that predictive analytics is going to be a huge piece of that, because that can help us get a sense on who do we need to spend time working with in terms of students at any given moment, rather than the sort of shotgun approach that we generally use for student financial aid these days and for student services as well. So in a nutshell, that's what we're doing in Texas.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Greg Fowler. Greg is the Chief Academic Officer and Vice President at Southern New Hampshire University's College of Online and Continuing Education.
Hello again. And I feel like I said a lot of things yesterday, so I don't want to be redundant from the things I said. So for those who I talked to in small meetings, I apologize, and I'll try to be as brief as I can on some of those things. I want to make sure I answer the questions at least up front. For those of you who weren't here yesterday, the Southern New Hampshire University operates with 3 basic verticals in place. First is, of course, our university campus, which is our give or take 100-year-old school, about 3,800 students, very much the traditional education that you would see at most institutions, dorms, fraternities, sports life. I told you yesterday that we just won the national soccer tournament that we were in. Then we have, of course, our College of Online and Continuing Education, which is about 38,000 students currently, and is primarily online. There are a couple of centers around the Northeast. And then we have the College for America, which is what everybody seems to be talking about these days. And if I were to answer the question about do each of these cut costs, the answer is yes, substantially so. Our College of Online is substantially cheaper than our university campus, and our College for America is substantially cheaper than even our College of Online Continuing Education. I'm assuming, of course, that students are going through a typical 4-year program from start to finish. As most of you probably read in the Inside Higher Education model earlier this week, we just launched our bachelor's degree for $10,000. We have had an associate's degree that's been in operation now since September of 2013 at $5,000. And a lot of this works basically for the same reasons that my colleagues here on the board said. That is primarily the unbundling of the faculty model, and that is the ability to do various things in different ways with the faculty roles that you would see in traditional places. So I'll talk a little bit about how these things happen, and then I'll try to get to what I want to do is talk about the sort of business broad sense of what I've basically learned in the last several years on business when it comes to things that I think can be transferable to other places, or how what we have done has taught us certain lessons that I think are applicable regardless of what institutions may be doing moving forward. So first, with this unbundled faculty model, we do have all the basic roles that you would see at a traditional institution when it comes to the curriculum development, the assessment pieces, and all the other things that you'd want to see. But when it comes to the College for America, for those of you who haven't read about it, we use a lot of the open courseware, a lot of the open educational resources, the types of things that would allow us to keep costs down for the learning and resource side of students. And the faculty or instructional part of this is really because College for America is a business-to-business model. That is, right now it's not open if you were simply to walk up today and say, I want to take courses there. We would ask you which of the businesses that we partnered with do you have associations with, and basically try to figure out how to make that work if you were working with one of those businesses. So for that to work, we basically have mentors in all of those various institutions. So if you were with, let's say, McDonald's or FedEx, you would be working with people who are aware of the skill sets that business is looking for you to be successful, and they're there to help mentor you in those types of roles. We also have advisors and learning resources that will help you, but the reason it works for that at your own pace model is specifically because you can actually move at your own pace, and that those people have a much better sense of what you're trying to do moving forward. Same thing is true, by the way, at the College of Online and Continuing Education. We also, as some of you may have read, the Chronicle just released a piece this morning. We have about 2,700 adjunct faculty around the country. At any given time, about 1,200 or 1,400 of those people are teaching for us. We have, in the last year, been running a pilot on full-time faculty to see what can we learn from the full-time faculty that we have in place. And as the Chronicle noted this morning, we are going to be hiring about 45 full-time faculty members in the next couple of months to help us move forward with the things that we've learned as best practices in those types of areas. They will help, of course, with governance and other things, but the primary thing they will be centered on is, once again, what our student success model is, and that is we want you to help our students be successful, particularly the ones who are struggling in various areas. So with that in mind, I did come up with 4 basic points that I really wanted to talk about this morning, and I'll talk about those in some detail, and then when the time comes for questions, I'll open it up for there. What do I know now, or what do we know at SNHU that I think is extremely important for people if they're going to try to go down this road of building this model? Point number 1 is something I said yesterday, and some people sort of laughed at it, but it is keep your egos in check when you're trying to do this. The various places that I've seen that have tried to do this around the country, the places that have been very successful were very clear about what their mission was, what they were focused on, and they didn't try to do everything. It's very tempting for a person to come into this and say, I can do it all better than anybody's ever done it before. And that goes for every single thing that I see wrong with education. And the bottom line is that everything doesn't need to be fixed. And being able to understand what you're trying to do does help a lot when it comes to keeping your focus on those things. The other side of that, of course, is knowing what does work. One of the things that worked for us at SNHU is that we did have a traditional campus that had been around for 100 years. We did have a whole lot of faculty who were there who had been working in those areas. They had spent a lot of time developing their programs, developing their courses, and had a really good sense of what they should see if we were talking about what students needed to do to be competent. Well, why don't we go out and try to totally rebuild all that when we can take that knowledge and move forward with it? So when the College of Online and Continuing Education went forward, the first thing we did was say, let's take a look at what we have in place. Let's talk to these faculty and engage them in the process and have them help us build these things moving forward. So being able to do that and being aware of what those resources were and being willing to take advantage of those things saved us a huge amount of time, saved us a huge amount of money, and of course a huge amount of frustration. We didn't have to spend anywhere near as much time trying to force things down people's throats when it came to trying to say, we want you to think about outcomes and assessment in a different way here. They were certainly willing to have those conversations as we move forward. Point two, and this one really does apply a lot at SNHU, is define your culture and protect your brand. And brand is something that when we talk to faculty about, we sometimes get a little bit of resistance on. But the first thing is to understand what your mission is and to understand the environment in which you're operating. So when it comes to are all the things that we do at SNHU transferable to other places? Probably not, because you operate in a different culture than we do, and you have a good sense of here are the things that the faculty will accept, here are the things that the governance model allows for. But generally being aware of those things and your limitations and how to make things operate, being aware of how those things tie back to the mission of the institution and what you're really trying to do, being focused on those things will save you a great deal of frustration moving forward. When I say protect your brand, it really has much more to do with the idea of knowing what you are, knowing who you are, and more importantly, how you want to be perceived by your students, and taking action to make sure that everybody who's on board buys into that. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen our commercials, and one of the things that a lot of people say is that these commercials represent something, and they put a lot of marketing ability out there. But all of that marketing ability does nothing for us if when students come there, the reality doesn't match what we are actually doing when they get there. Certainly it's one of those things that we pay very close attention to, because we want to make sure that when we say we're committed to student success, all of our actions committed to doing those types of things. When a student calls for admissions, or when a student calls for the instructor or calls for advising, are we living our brand? Are we living those promises that we made to students when we said we're really interested in investing in your success? If not, then social media in 20 minutes can undo what you've done in a year of commercials, because very quickly you will discover that people do talk to each other far more than you ever imagined sometimes. And being aware of that and being able to say, we're very committed to what we're doing, and this isn't simply the things we're saying out in public, these are the things we're practicing behind the scenes, really does make a huge difference for your students. 3, create your support mechanisms. And I consolidated a lot of various things into this. Yesterday when we were in one of the breakout sessions, I said something that I want to reemphasize here. Academics, of course, academic quality is always extremely important. I don't want to ever have anyone misread what I say next by making sure I emphasize that. But it has been true in every place that I've worked that when you ask a student what makes them successful, they will answer more often than not the student support, the student advising. That side of things is at least as important as the things that you're doing in the academic classroom. And every survey I've ever seen in the last 15 years, if you say, what is the single biggest factor, asking of a student, what made you successful, they will say, it was my advisor, it was my student mentor, it was those people who were there not simply to teach me the instruction that I needed, but were there when things happened. And the bottom line is you have to be aware that particularly for students who are in a non-traditional environment, life's going to happen. And if you don't have a model in place for when that happens to those students, if you haven't built a support mechanism to help them, then you are not going to be able to retain them. One of the things I've heard over and over again, and I said again now, is that we have to be aware that at least for the non-traditional student, we are never going to be better than their third priority after their job and after their families. And so when something goes down, it's going to be, where can I compromise that So if we don't have systems in place that are going to help them, then they're not going to be retained. So in addition to that, the other, as we talk about the idea of supporting students, the other thing is that we also have to have tools in place that support the infrastructure, and I've heard both of my colleagues say this as well. It is one of those things where you have to be aware in real time what is happening to the students in your environment. Knowing after the term is over that students were not successful does them no good. So the infrastructure, when it comes to IT, when it comes to the analytics you're looking at, we need to be aware when a student is struggling, what their student's struggling in, and how we can be able to help them. So you need to build the infrastructure that's going to give you that knowledge. And finally, the fourth point and last point I wanted to make was, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Particularly if you're going to be the person leading the charge, you have to be willing to be shot at a little bit. Even if you're going to just step outside the herd, you're going to be more of a target than you were for others. And you've got to be willing to say, okay, we're going to try some things, and some of those things aren't going to work, and we're okay with that. It's funny, I was interviewing someone a couple of months ago, and one of the questions I was asking in interviews is, how comfortable are you with ambiguity? And the person's response was, define ambiguity. And I said, this is probably not going to be the place for you. Because there are a lot of things that you need to be aware of that are you're going to be trying, and some of those things you're going to say, wait a minute, we need to back up and try something different. And having an environment where the moment things don't go the way you expect causes people to panic is not going to create a successful environment for this. It is not cheap. It certainly is not cheap. But over time, fortunately, I think, and you can't expect overnight growth. I mean, we've been very fortunate in the growth that we've had at SNHU, and we're very proud of that. But I'm not going to say that you're going to walk out tomorrow and, have year-over-year increases in student populations of 30, 40%. And if that's what you're expecting, and if that doesn't happen, it's sort of like when your IRA person calls you and says, are you comfortable investing in the stock market or bonds or what? If you are not comfortable going stock market here, this is one of those places you need to be very aware of, that it can be high risk, and be comfortable with that as well. So those are the things I'll leave you with, and as the conversation goes, I'll try to answer more things. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's probably not by accident when we get down to talking about business models and sustainability that we have two panel members who are from the state level. And it is my pleasure to introduce Al Lynn, the Vice President, Innovation and E-Learning with the Kentucky Council on Postsecondary Education.
Good morning. I'm going to go real fast here to see if we can save a couple of minutes for questions. The first three speakers have really put a lot of material out on the table, and I will not try to be redundant for it, but I will speak a little bit from the public sector perspective. And I think if we did a SWOT analysis on the projects that y'all are starting to implement at your institutions, you would find that most of the strengths tend to be in the academic and student areas, and most of your weaknesses are going to be in the business area. Public institutions don't do business cases well. We're used to being subsidized. Unfortunately, in the past few years, subsidies in Kentucky have gone from 2/3 state appropriation expenditures to 1/3, and it's flipped, and our tuition has gone the other way. So our revenues are really coming from our students, and that hasn't stopped. It's going to continue to head in that direction, and the tuition revenues and the student as customers is going to become more and more. We're being privatized. The public schools are being privatized, and you need to build that into your business case. But the Guido Sarducci model for this really is you need some capital to get started. You got to look at your revenues, and you got to look at your expenses. Okay, so where is your capital going to come from? It's wonderful you can get grants to get yourself started up, and if you have, congratulations. If you haven't, the way that our Learn on Demand model, and we've got 3 models in Kentucky, Learn on Demand that's been in place for a few years and is financially successful, one that's about to launch, and then one that we're just started to work on, and they're going to have 3 different financial models. But the way that one got started was with a loan. Okay, if you have a revenue positive model that you're putting in front of your president and your board, get money any place you can. In that case, I had a loan fund at my disposal with $1.4 million in it. I loaned the community colleges $460,000, which they used to develop the initial degrees to get themselves started. When tuition revenues started flowing in, they paid back the loan. Just like it's a startup business, and that's exactly what you're in. In looking forward into the third model up there with the Commonwealth College, we're discussing using those same resource, but the institutions are a little skittish about the loan thing. That's not in the culture of a public university, but we're talking about taking an equity position. Okay? Take an equity position in the startup on the anticipation that the tuition revenues are going to be there and there'll be a positive flow. But if not, we'll take the hit right along with the institution and lose money on it. We'll take the risk with them. But just some innovative ways you can look at getting your capital on your expenses. Biggest expense is these people have talked about is the people expense. In our first case there, I mentioned this yesterday, we pay the adjunct faculty for those community college degrees on a per student basis, and we pay bonuses for performance of those students in those courses. You might want to look at multiple ways of paying your faculty, which are going to be your largest expense going forward. The last thing I want to say, on the tuition, on the revenue, I just make the point, right now we've got a big battle going on, and you will have tension there. Our politicians want the $10,000 degree, reasonable or not. The industry, the employers that we're talking with, because they're going to be subsidizing a lot of the tuition, want it as low as possible. The institutions see it as a revenue generator, so they want the tuitions high as possible. We have a tradition of charging tuition premiums for our online classes right now, so that's kind of where we're starting from. And in Commonwealth College, we have not yet fully resolved that going forward. And the last thing I'll leave you with is, if you are not familiar with the work of Clay Christensen, I would suggest that you do get familiar with it. He wrote one of the classic business books a few years ago called The Innovator's Dilemma. You are innovators. This is innovative stuff. You are going to try to introduce a new, different, innovative model within a very traditional institution. There are 100 ways that this can fail, and Clay will point those out and have research in other industries, as well as K-12 and post-secondary education in his research of why they fail. And basically you want to, as best you can, run around your obstacles and not through your obstacles to net out Clay Christensen. But I would go ahead and do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Russ, we're a little over. Can we have 5 minutes for questions?
Yeah, Jane, we said we'll stretch this to 10:30, and we'll just trim 15 minutes from the breakouts.
Oh, okay, great. So we'll open it up for questions.
Gary Berry, American Public University System. It sounds like 3 of the 4 of you chose to create new degree programs for your competency-based offerings. I'm curious why you didn't choose a currently existing degree and deconstruct the competencies from the outcomes that existed in those programs.
First of all, I'm not clear if if 3 of you really did create new degree programs, but for anyone who did, Texas did. Can you address that?
Yeah. So in part, it was, we wanted to make sure that this was extraordinarily well aligned with workplace needs, but it also was a facilitation and logistical decision. I spent a lot of time talking with faculty to get them to not think about courses, even though on the back end we're course-based. We leveraged a lot of things that we already had in place. As a state, we have a common course numbering system. We have common learning outcomes for our general education courses. And so we leveraged all of that. But we didn't want them to be stuck in thinking about what they already had. We wanted them to really fully engage in this thought exercise of what should this look like and how can this be different. And when faculty are so embedded in that course model, it's kind of hard sometimes to break out of it.
Anyone else want to speak to that? Allison?
Everything that Van said is true for our case as well. We're starting our new degrees. One of our new degrees that we're building is an existing degree, and the faculty came to us and asked if they could work in our model. And we're faculty-driven, and so if a faculty comes to us or a chair comes to us with a degree, we'll do that one. But to start, we had the same concerns that Van did. It was changing the culture and to not think of it as something that already existed.
I have a quick question. I think, Greg, you could answer this specifically, and Allison maybe theoretically, but how much excess revenue are you making, and do you get to keep it, or does it get sent off to someone else?
Well, remember that the College for America, which is the competency-based approach there. Let me quickly answer the question over here, though. We actually did do that. I got from an APUS, where we did go through and basically take our bachelor's in general studies, which already had outcomes, and of course all of the courses within those have course outcomes as well. And they built the program, they basically sort of retro-built the program at the associate's level for College for America. That's true, as I mentioned yesterday, all of our programs that go from one college to the other must have the same program outcomes because it's an HU degree. So anytime, for example, communication, healthcare management, any of the things that you're seeing, they have to start off with, do all three colleges agree on what the program outcomes are going to be, and then build from there. To this, the College for America was started, I didn't actually mention this in my section, with a Lumina grant. And so it has not yet reached the point where it has to be self-sustaining. It's only launched students in the last year. But when it does reach that point, it is estimated that within 2 to 3 years, if the enrollments in the business model does continue, it should be financially independent, and yes, it would be able to use those funds as part of its own revenue moving forward.
We are not revenue producing yet, and we expect to be revenue producing in 4 years, and we will get to keep the money to build out.
Pat, I mentioned in the Learn-on-Demand model, there's 16 institutions where you can take the degree. There's about 6 who develop the product, and there's a central administration that runs it. All of the money comes into the central administration. The overhead of the infrastructure is paid for, and then there's a formula that distributes it out to the teaching and or the student home campus.
Hi, I just had a quick question around, likely probably for Allison and Al, around the socialization at the student level regarding these new learning models, if it's largely a marketing effort, if it's more happening at the enrollment or academic advisement stage, or how you're getting the awareness out at the student level.
That's such a good question, and in the business model session, I focus mainly on how we do the enculturation of faculty and student services people. But with students, it's even more intense because it's a very, very different way of doing things. And so we have online video tutorials for every aspect of the degree. But when the student comes to us, they have a readiness assessment so that we can see if they're math and computer and literate and all those different things. And while they're doing that, they're having extensive conversations. They're already assigned a mentor. They're having extensive conversations with their mentor, talking about the degree, talking about what the internships will look like, what the projects look like, but teaching students what competency-based education is. And so that's such a good question. And from the very beginning, as part of the curriculum, we constructed that conversation with the student.
Yeah, that was one of the pieces that we missed early on, and we're finding that the students were struggling with that. We got $1 million Complete College America grant that went totally into student services, both on the front end, like Allison talked about, as well as ongoing support with success coaches, and have found that that has turned it around, and would suggest it's a mandatory. You just can't skimp on that, or strategically you won't be successful.
We've also found that there is a student culturation period as well. We run very short terms. We've run 2 terms now. The third one starts next week. And what we've discovered is that there's a change in behavior between students between their first and their second term. We think there'll be even more changes in behavior, but it takes a couple of terms for them to get used to this as a very different learning methodology and modality, and the role of that coach is just absolutely critical in helping with that student socialization.
Hello, I'm Ellen Bullier from the University of New England. Just like to ask Greg, what's your thinking on switching to the full-time faculty when you've had such great success with the decoupling model, and what do you think will be the big assignments for them in the faculty governance side?
Well, it's certainly true that we want to have their input on everything from the curriculum, the academic policies, and things that we're putting forth there. The benefit that we have seen, particularly from our full-time faculty pilot in the last year, happens in some very specific courses particularly, and that is in courses where the assessments involve a substantial amount of writing, or courses where there are assignments that are far more complex than simply some of the basic objective type assessments that you might see. The time that the faculty have to dig into feedback, to respond on discussion posts, those types of things, or to allow students. We believe in we believe in a not sink or swim model, meaning it's not simply the instructor's job to put the information out there and either the student gets it or they don't. What we are trying to do is find as many teachable moments for those struggling students as possible. Doing this with full-time faculty does allow them to be able to use those teachable moments or take advantage of them in a way that a lot of the adjuncts don't. In addition, of course, simply providing an environment where people do feel long-term sustainability and don't have to spend a lot of time shopping around every term for where they're going to teach next does allow them to have time to commit to our students. So those are the things that we've been looking at in the last year, and so those are the things that we hopefully will be seeing moving forward.
Just quick follow-up, do you think there's going to be crossover from your verticals with your full-time faculty in the on-campus? Or is it going to be separate governance systems?
There are some things that will be universal, because SNHU does have some universal policies, but each of the colleges will have their own governance abilities, and that's another place where having faculty who are specifically aware of that environment will be useful.
Okay, I appreciate so much the great questions, and I especially appreciate this great panel. So let's give them all a hand. And, thank you so much.